Nobody in that gym expected what was about to unfold. The room was full of seasoned martial artists, black belts lining the walls, trophies in every corner, and an air of confidence that only years of dedicated training can produce. And then there was him, a quiet man, a Filipino security guard named Rico, who worked the overnight shift at a building 2 blocks down the road. He had calloused hands, worn sneakers, and a humble smile that gave absolutely nothing away. When the head instructor of the dojo, a third-degree black belt with over 15 years of competition experience, invited Rico onto the mat for what everyone assumed would be a quick, lighthearted exchange, no one could have imagined the lesson that was about to be taught. Not the instructor, not the students watching from the sides, not even the cameras that happened to be rolling that afternoon.
Rico had been coming around the dojo for a few weeks at that point, always lingering near the entrance after his shifts ended, quietly watching the classes through the glass. The instructor, a well-meaning man named Master Chen, had eventually waved him inside and offered him a seat. Rico was soft-spoken and always polite. He would say things like, "I just like to watch," and "I used to do a little something back home." That phrase, "a little something back home," would later become something the students in that gym would never forget. Because what Rico had been doing back home, in the Philippines, since the age of 7, was Arnis, the national martial art of the Philippines, also known as Eskrima, or Kali, one of the most sophisticated, complete, and battle-tested fighting systems ever developed by any culture on Earth. Arnis is not a martial art that gets a lot of mainstream spotlight, and that is precisely why what happened in that gym caught everyone completely off guard. Unlike karate or taekwondo, which are often associated with high kicks and formal competition formats, Arnis was developed and refined over centuries by the indigenous peoples of the Philippine Islands. It was shaped by tribal warfare, colonial resistance, and the hard reality of combat in environments where your life depended on your ability to read an opponent and respond before they could finish their move. The art emphasizes fluid, flowing movement, rapid transitions between weapons and empty hands, and a deeply intuitive understanding of distance, timing, and angles. Filipino warriors who practiced this art were so formidable that Spanish colonizers, upon arriving in the Philippines in the 16th century, found themselves facing fighters who matched them weapon for weapon and sometimes surpassed them. What makes Arnis particularly unique is the philosophy behind it. Practitioners are trained to treat their empty hands as weapons first, with every open-hand strike, trap, and joint manipulation flowing directly from the same movements used with a stick or blade. This cross-training philosophy produces a type of fighter who is exceptionally hard to read because their instincts are built on a weapons-based framework that most other martial arts simply do not account for. Rico had grown up training under his grandfather, an old Eskrima master from Cebu, one of the regions where the art reached its highest levels of development. He had spent years drilling, sparring, and absorbing everything his grandfather could teach him. When his family migrated abroad, he carried those skills with him quietly, without fanfare, without a gym membership, without a uniform or a belt or a certificate on the wall. Master Chen had been running his karate school for over a decade. He was well respected in the local martial arts community, had competed nationally, and had trained dozens of students who had gone on to earn their own black belts. He was not the type of instructor who underestimated people, but he was also working with limited information. When he invited Rico to spar, he was thinking of it the way most school demonstrations go, a gentle exchange, a chance to show the class what practical application looks like against a non-trained partner. He said to the room, "Let's see what Rico's got." The students laughed warmly. Rico smiled, and Master Chen bowed. And then everything changed.
The moment Rico settled into his stance, something shifted in the room. It was subtle but unmistakable. A few of the senior students later described it as the moment when the air felt different. Rico did not adopt any recognizable karate or boxing stance. His body was slightly angled, his hands were relaxed, but positioned with a precision that spoke of deep muscle memory. His feet were not planted, they were alive, constantly making micro-adjustments, reading the ground beneath him the way a sailor reads the movement of water. Master Chen came forward with a controlled combination, the kind of technique he had drilled thousands of times, and Rico, without apparent effort, redirected it. Not blocked it, redirected it. There is a meaningful difference. A block meets force with force. What Rico did was something far more efficient.
In Arnis, one of the foundational principles is called defanging the snake, a concept where instead of meeting an opponent's strongest point directly, you target the limb delivering the attack. The result is that the attack is neutralized at its source. Rico applied this with a naturalness that only comes from a lifetime of practice. His responses were not rehearsed in the sense of being rigid, they flowed. One movement transitioned into the next with the seamless logic of water finding its path. Master Chen, to his enormous credit, stopped after the first exchange and looked at Rico with an expression that had moved far beyond surprise. He asked Rico to do it again, and Rico obliged. And then again, and by the fifth exchange, the entire class had risen from their seats.
What unfolded over the next several minutes was less a sparring session and more an education. Rico demonstrated footwork patterns that the students had never seen, triangular movement systems that took him out of the direct line of any attack, while simultaneously positioning him for a counter. He showed how a single flowing motion could serve as both a deflection and an entry into a closer range. He demonstrated the concept of the live hand, where the non-dominant hand is never passive but is always working to trap, redirect, or control an opponent's limb. Master Chen absorbed every moment of it with the open-minded intensity of a man who had just discovered an entire chapter of a book he thought he had already finished.
One of the senior students, a young woman who had been training karate for 6 years and had recently earned her second-degree black belt, asked if she could try. Rico agreed immediately and with characteristic warmth. What happened next was equally remarkable, though perhaps even more instructive. She was faster than Master Chen, and her reflexes were sharp from years of competition training. But Rico adjusted. He slowed down just enough to let her find her range, and then he demonstrated a principle that Eskrima masters have taught for generations, that speed without structure is opportunity. Every time she committed to a technique, there was a fraction of a second where her structure was momentarily compromised, and Rico found that fraction every single time. Not to harm her, but to make the lesson visible. By the time Rico stepped off the mat, the gym was quiet in the way that gyms only get quiet when something genuinely profound has happened. Not uncomfortable quiet, reverent quiet. Master Chen shook his hand slowly, and then did something that meant everything in that room. He bowed. A full, deep bow, not a polite acknowledgement bow, a bow that said, "I have learned something from you today that I did not know yesterday." The students followed immediately, and Rico, being exactly the kind of person he was, bowed back just as deeply and said, "Your students are very good. My grandfather would have enjoyed training here." In the weeks that followed, Rico became a regular presence at the dojo, not as a student, but as a collaborator. Master Chen invited him to lead a series of informal sessions where Rico shared the foundational concepts of Arnis with the class. What the students discovered was that the art did not conflict with what they had already learned, it deepened it. The angles of attack in Arnis mapped directly onto concepts they already understood from karate, but from a different perspective that suddenly made certain principles click in ways years of drilling had not quite managed.
Several students described it as finally understanding why certain techniques worked, rather than just knowing that they did.
This is not an unusual outcome when people engage honestly with Filipino martial arts. The system was designed from its roots to be practical, adaptable, and complete. Because Arnis teaches weapons first, practitioners develop an acute spatial awareness and a sensitivity to distance that carries over powerfully into empty-hand training. The U.S. Army has incorporated Filipino martial arts principles into its modern Army Combatives program, and elite special forces units from multiple countries have trained in aspects of these arts precisely because of their battle-tested efficiency. The Russian Spetsnaz, the U.S. Army Rangers, and India's elite National Security Guard have all engaged with Filipino martial arts methodology in their training programs. This is not a folk art preserved in a museum. This is a living, breathing combat science.
Rico's story resonated with so many people when it was shared because it touched something universal. There's a kind of quiet dignity in carrying something extraordinary within you without advertising it. Most people spend enormous energy trying to signal their worth to the world. Rico did the opposite. He showed up every night to his security post, did his job with care, and only shared his depth when the moment genuinely called for it. That quality, the willingness to be underestimated without frustration, is itself a kind of mastery. His grandfather used to tell him that the deepest water makes the least noise. Rico lived that teaching every single day.
Master Chen later spoke about the experience in an interview with a local martial arts newsletter. He said that in over 15 years of teaching, that afternoon with Rico was among the most meaningful training experiences of his life. Not because he was surprised to find skill in an unexpected place, but because of what the encounter reminded him. He said it reminded him that mastery does not always wear a uniform. It does not always display its credentials. And a martial artist who stops being a student the moment they earn their black belt has fundamentally misunderstood what the belt is supposed to represent. The belt is a beginning. It is an invitation to go deeper. That afternoon with Rico made him feel, he said, like he had just walked through a door he had not previously known was there.
For the students who were present that day, the impact was lasting. Several of them began researching Filipino martial arts on their own, finding classes, watching instructors, reading about the history of Arnis and its roots in the indigenous fighting traditions of the Philippine Islands. They learned that the art had been declared the national martial art of the Philippines in 2009 by official legislation, that it is part of the physical education curriculum in Philippine schools, and that its reach has extended to military and law enforcement training programs around the world. They learned that what they had witnessed that afternoon was not a fluke or a trick. It was the natural expression of a system that had been refined by generations of practitioners whose lives sometimes depended on getting it right.
The video of Rico's session at the dojo, captured by one of the students on a phone propped against the equipment rack, made its way online. Comments poured in from Eskrima practitioners around the world who recognized immediately what they were seeing. Many were emotional. One comment, left by a Filipino man living in Germany, read simply, "My Lolo trained the same way. Thank you for showing this to the world." Another, from a martial arts instructor in Texas, wrote that he had been studying Arnis for 12 years, and watching Rico move was like watching his own teacher come to life on the screen. A retired military trainer commented that the footwork alone was worth a semester of study. What the video ultimately captured, beyond the techniques and the surprising outcome of the session, was a moment of genuine human connection through the shared language of martial arts. Master Chen and Rico came from different backgrounds, different training traditions, different countries. They met on a mat with no agenda other than curiosity and respect, and what emerged from that meeting was something neither of them could have produced alone.
That is what the greatest martial arts encounters produce. Not a winner and a loser, not a ranking or a record, a shared understanding that makes both people better than they were before they met.
Rico still works his security shifts. He still shows up quietly, does his job, and goes home. On certain evenings, he stops by Master Chen's gym. Sometimes he teaches. Sometimes he simply watches the class and offers a thought when one seems useful. He has become part of the fabric of that community in the specific way that only people of real substance can, not by demanding attention, but by offering something genuine whenever it is needed. The students know now that the man in the worn sneakers standing near the door is not just passing through. He is carrying something old and rare and worth paying close attention to.
Master Chen framed a photograph from that afternoon and hung it in the dojo. It shows Rico mid-movement, his body in one of those perfectly balanced transitional positions that Eskrima practitioners spend years trying to achieve. His expression is calm, his posture is alive. Behind him, the students and Master Chen are watching with expressions that tell the whole story without a single word. It is the face of people seeing something for the first time that they somehow feel they have always been meant to understand. That photograph now hangs alongside the belts and trophies and championship banners. And if you ask Master Chen which of those things on the wall he is most proud of, he will point without hesitation to the photograph. If there is a lesson in all of this, and there clearly is, it is one that every martial art worth its salt has always tried to teach. Humility opens doors that pride cannot even find. The greatest practitioners of any discipline tend to be the ones who never stop being students, the ones who can bow to a security guard in worn sneakers and mean it with their whole heart. Rico's grandfather used to say that a warrior who thinks he has nothing left to learn has already lost the most important match of his life. On that particular afternoon, in a gym full of black belts, a quiet man with calloused hands and a warm smile gave an entire room the gift of that lesson, and not a single person who was present that day has forgotten it since.